Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Four Guys talking about AI. I'm here with my good buddies Neil Polachek and Greg Sterling. John Gerard wasn't available today, so it's going to be the three of us today. What's going on, guys?
Nothing and everything.
busy week in the world of AI. This week, we're going to talk about something deeper than just new AI tools. We're going to talk about trust, control, and who's handling who are we handling the future to? Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, has been sounding the alarm. He's been saying that he said in an interview that he hasn't had a good night's sleep since ChatGPT launched. His concerns range from AI-driven fraud and cyber attacks to something even bigger, a world where we slowly become dependent on AI and we lose the ability to think and function without it. That was something that he mentioned in an interview recently. But at the same time, there's a growing counter narrative. Critics are questioning whether people should be building these systems that actually should they be trusted, while others are warning that AI models are getting powerful enough to hack real-world systems at scale. And we'll discuss that a little bit. There was some news this week about this new Anthropic release, Claude release that they haven't released fully yet, but we'll get into the cybersecurity risks there. And all this stuff is not theoretical anymore. This week, top financial leaders, including the Fed, bank leaders, people from Wells Fargo, the CEO of Wells Fargo, B of A, other banks, were all briefed on Anthropic's new Mythos model. It's and the cybersecurity risk that it brings. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll bring it down to a real world scenario with Neil's firsthand response about ChatGPT and Claude and what it reveals about how these tools are actually showing up in people's lives. So let's get into it today and start the conversation talking about, Sam Altman's concerns. He's been sounding the alarm, talking about, risks that what could happen and what keeps him up at night. Greg, you want to lead off with this one and what are your thoughts on this?
Sort of in fairness to Sam Altman, I suppose, because he's been getting a lot of bad press lately. He has from the beginning been candid about what he perceives to be the dangers of AI, and that won him a lot of goodwill in the beginning. There was a profile in the New Yorker by Ronan Farrow, out, not exclusively by him, but he was one of the two people on the byline, and it's a pretty extensive profile. And the bottom line is that Altman is not a trustworthy guy. There's just a lot of stuff in there that kind of impugns his character. We can talk about this if we want. It's sort of the latest in a series of negative PR hits that OpenAI is taking. But in terms of the larger issue about trust and the societal impact of these systems, I mean, what has to happen is that these companies, either there's got to be regulation or these companies have to self-regulate or some hybrid model. And, Anthropic is the better version of what OpenAI has been doing. They are actually trying to build guardrails and trying to be more ethical in their conduct. Witness the Department of Defense controversy that happened several weeks ago. So there are some real dangers, and the White House is trying to prevent the states from doing any regulation of AI. Washington, by the same token, has not gotten its act together. So these companies are sort of running wild and left to do their own thing. And it's just a question of whether they can, they're ethical or not, or how much, self-restraint will impact their bottom line or their place in the market.
Yeah.
That was a very long-winded.
I mean, I see why Sam Altman can't sleep at night. And it's not just what's going on with his company and with AI. Apparently, somebody threw a Molotov cocktail at his house, and someone was arrested last night in San Francisco. So, I mean, this is clearly stirring some emotions in people, both in the industry and outside the industry, and what all this AI impact is going to have on our society. I mean, I think it's starting to creep into people's consciousness, like, where is all this going? What does all this mean?
I mean, people have primarily been fearful of how it would impact their jobs, and that concern is pretty widespread. I read something I'm having deja vu right now, so maybe we talked about it previously, but I read something that talked about how college students are rethinking their majors to try and, direct themselves in ways that are a little bit more AI proof.
For sure they are. My daughter's case in point. She just changed her major because of that. From a communications major, it was graphic communications to a business major to be able to just have more flexibility and have the, be more nimble, be able to pivot faster and have some, practical business acumen and experience because that's what it's going to take. If you listen to Mark Andreessen or anybody else who is, kind of like the leading this market, they're all saying, you're going to have to be quick on your feet and be willing to pivot pretty quickly going forward.
There's a kind of conflict of interest in the AI companies which are supposed to self-regulate. I mean, Anthropic seems to be doing the best job, maybe Microsoft, I think, has been relatively ethical in all this, but they're sort of a non-player at this moment. There's this sort of intense competition, so they want to keep developing, the fail fast mentality or whatever, move fast and break things, all that nonsense. The market rewards that, investors reward that, but by the same token, the Biden administration tried to set up some rules, some guidelines, and I think there was some sort of council that was being established and getting companies to sort of make these voluntary pledges to be safe and all that. And then that all went away. And the states have tried to regulate, but unevenly. And the federal government is not going to do anything because there's so much dysfunction there. And so there's this kind of Wild West situation, and there's no leadership really. I mean, the closest thing we have to leadership, I think, is what Dario Amodei at Anthropic is doing right now. Just being conscientious about the risks.
I threw what I was talking about in the chat window. It's the Center for Humane Technology, which is started by this guy Tristan Harris. And what he's really talking about is, how does our society broadly, 8 billion people, kind of collectively get in front of this thing instead of being handed the implications or the consequences of this thing. And it's worth a listen. I listened to him on Kara Swisher's podcast the other day. I mean, it's really interesting. I know he's selling a book, so you got to take it with a bit of grain of salt, but the points he makes are very true.
But what is the solution, though? What is the solution?
8 billion humans, if we stood up and actually said, we don't like where this is going without some guardrails, without some policy in place, people would do stuff about it. But we're sitting down, scrolling on our phones, and
I would argue that's a kind of a naive fantasy. I mean, we couldn't do it. The world hasn't been able to do anything about climate change in the past 35 years. I mean, there have been some coordinated efforts, the Paris Accord and all of that, but in the end, we have fallen short, and that's an existential threat on some level. This is in a different context, and I think getting people on a planetary scale to agree to something. I mean, it should be then in the UN, right? But the U.S. wouldn't agree to anything.
It's ineffectual. But think about what they did in Australia with not
social media
with social media. That's right. It's that kind of stuff that he is thinking needs to happen.
But that's not going to happen in the United States because of the economy and the degree to which these
in the United States, because the people have chosen not to make it front and center.
It's also the financial driver of the economy. I mean, that's
right. That's right.
It's a very important, future driver of the economy. So I see like on a practical level, what you're saying for mankind, for average person. Yeah, for sure. But what's the consequence? I mean, this is sort of a little bit like the No Kings protests, in a way. It's like, there's no teeth with that. There's no consequence. If you don't do this, then what happens? And there's no consequence to it. You can get out there and protest, but nobody's saying, for example, like, that you need to be actually doing something. Otherwise, there are going to be consequences to your behavior.
Well, and he does say, Tristan does talk about the shift from people using ChatGPT to Claude or other tools recently because of the Department of Defense stuff. And so people can vote with their feet and vote with their money.
So I saw a statistic that I didn't look deeply into, but it was something like just under 40%. This was a US based survey. Just under 40% of consumers participated in some sort of boycott over the last 12 months. So like Target or some other thing. And the idea there is that people care about ethical conduct, or they have passionate feelings about the way that companies behave, and they can express that in their buying behavior. Or, Scott Galloway's trying to lead this boycott of OpenAI, and there's some impact. Consumers can have an impact. If OpenAI, for example, is perceived to be an unethical company, then it will suffer in the market because they will have trouble growing their subscriber base. They will have trouble, against rivals.
Monetizing declining subscriber base with ads. All their money's
Right. I mean, they have a lot of they have a lot of users, but I do think that these things matter, and that consumers can express their opinions via the market, and that's where the teeth are.
And there's no moat. There's no moat. There's no reason I can't switch in 5.
The brand is a moat to some degree.
It could be very short-lived. I don't know. I mean, this could be a Netscape, kind of thing.
Yes.
Very much so. Where, if you look at what Anthropic is doing, they're making a lot of really interesting, correct moves. They're building Cloud Cowork, where you integrate your, Neil, you were just talking about this, your email, your calendar, your, all of your tools that you use daily, Slack and whatnot, all into Cowork so that it becomes an assistant for you. And those are hooks. That's a moat. Now you're starting to build that moat. Or Cloud Code, where you can build apps very quickly and use skills to be able to create full apps that are custom apps. And we've talked about how the world is changing from SaaS applications to custom apps and custom workflows, down to even the individual level or at a company level, where you build a team of agents, for example, that do a number of tasks, and you can do this all in Cloud Code. So those are examples of moats, for example, but also at the policy level. I find it really interesting, this whole Mythos release that they're doing, which is Mythos is Anthropic's new, it's their new model that they're going to be releasing. What they found is that Mythos is so intelligent that it causes potential risks with being able to pick passwords at scale and go in and sign into people's bank accounts and change passwords, or any number of accounts that we have. And if you don't have two-factor authentication on your bank account, do it now. Because you really need that. But even still, it can figure out ways to be able to do this. And there are all kinds of dark web libraries of passwords and all these kinds of things that it will go figure out a way to figure out your passwords. So, so before they release this, what they're doing is that they're having conversations with CEOs of banks, with the government, and they're making these preliminary releases available to Microsoft and Apple and Nvidia, on a closed basis, to be able to say, hey, before we release this out to the public, let's all put guardrails in place to protect people, because this release is extremely powerful. It's a much different approach than releasing Sora, for example, onto the world, and then allowing all kinds of intellectual property to be, refactored with generative video. And it's just a much different kind of ethos. And now they're shutting it down because they found that it was just kind of a plaything for people, and not so much.
People got bored with it.
Yeah.
People got bored with it.
And so, and for all those reasons, but you can imagine, the go-to-market strategy is just very different, and the thinking behind this is very different. It's very opportunistic on the OpenAI side, and go after it. And even when Anthropic had the issues with the Department of War, I always want to call it the Department of Defense because
That's because it still is the Department of Defense. It requires a congressional act to rename it. So,
but the point is that Anthropic had a problem with the Department of Defense, and OpenAI just went right in there and took those government contracts. And so very opportunistic, kind of thing to do. And so here you have Anthropic doing things that are a little bit go to market, more responsible. Is their platform risky? Are there challenges and problems with it? Of course, but they're not just releasing it onto the market just because they could. And they could just flip a switch and just let everybody use it. But they're trying to go to market in a little bit more of a responsible way. And
Andy, think about the product management effort at Anthropic with Claude versus OpenAI. And the fact that I've now connected my inboxes and my calendars, that does start to build a moat. Yes. And I know firsthand of a person who's there who is literally, they're working on the knowledge stack. So it started at Word, it's, then to PowerPoint, which apparently they're bringing out a slide building, tool that's supposed to be really fantastic. Built a presentation for Uber in 5 minutes. Outstanding work. So they're going through what you would call the office stuff, the suite of office tools.
Yeah.
And they're rebuilding them in Anthropic, and that becomes a real moat. I mean, yes. I think that becomes a real moat. And
Cloud Code is a moat. And OpenAI, has their version of this Codex model. But it's not, it's a little bit of an afterthought, whereas, Anthropic is really led with this. And if you look on Instagram or, on TikTok or any social media, and you type in Claude Code, you're going to start getting videos in your feed about all the things that you can do with Claude Code. It's really pretty phenomenal. And those things are remote. That becomes a differentiator. And for me, it seems like the results are even better lately with Claude. I've fully done the switch.
And yet about Claude versus ChatGPT, I was in a physician's office a couple days ago. There was this great picture of what I believed was Albuquerque or somewhere in the Southwest, 1965-ish, when we had driven from Ohio to Los Angeles and we were moving to LA. And I said to the woman at the desk, I said, "Where is that?" And she said, "Albuquerque." So I tested it. So I took an image of it, put it into ChatGPT, put it into Claude. ChatGPT told me it was Las Vegas and tried to tell me that, you see the neon stuff there, that's the Strip, right? Claude said, "Oh, this is Albuquerque, New Mexico in 1960, early 60s." And so I got to believe they knew where that photograph was taken, the doctor's office. Yeah. And Claude had it nailed, and ChatGPT was trying to tell me it was somewhere else and trying to give me some rationalization why it said it was Las Vegas, because I asked it again, and it was trying to reaffirm its original take. I thought it was fascinating.
It's really interesting what's happening. There's a fork in the road here, in terms of quality, in terms of the moat, in terms of policy, go-to-market strategy, and follow through. And what's also interesting is that there seems to be less infighting at Anthropic than there is at OpenAI.
Seemingly,
right? We don't know for sure, but
we don't hear about internal discord to the same degree.
Yeah, and there's quite a bit, and there has been a lot of leadership that's left OpenAI, which makes you wonder. I don't know. Maybe people are being entrepreneurial and opportunistic in their own right.
If we hear about it in one place, it may be going on in the other place, but they're better at keeping a lid on it, which means there's not as much going on in that other place, I would conclude.
Yeah. That seems to be, a natural conclusion. That's my conclusion as well. But, then you have OpenAI that just raised, what, $117 billion.
120
$120
billion.
billion, right? So, all these things are really just like the numbers are so huge. I was watching a video the other day talking about the viability of these data centers that are being built out as well. And when you look at the data center model and you look at Moore's law and you tie that into a data center, okay, so you spend however many hundreds of billions of dollars building a data center, and the lifetime value of those servers that are in there is what, 4 years, 3 years, So then they have to rebuild. It's like a farm that has to just get fully harvested, and then a new crop gets built. And so, what is the viability of that on a financial basis?
That's a whole additional discussion, right? The data center, the politics of the data center, the degree to which it's kind of the driver of a lot of whatever slim economic growth exists in this economy is tied into that kind of activity. I want to come back for a second to the policy issue. OpenAI is the opportunistic / unethical company. Anthropic is the ethical company that's being thoughtful and restrained about how they roll out this more powerful model, Mythos. But is that how the society should be operating? Or should there, it goes to whether you trust these companies or not. If you don't trust them, you call for government regulation. If you trust them, you think that they can self-regulate and they'll do the right thing, and ultimately the market will, sort it all out. But I think this is a much more existential technology than the internet itself or something like search, even though that wiped out a lot of industries like classified advertising. And
I would say social media is not that far below this in terms of the impact it has.
Well, yes, and I think there's many different layers of discussion that we could go on and on and on about what's really what should we point to explain the problems that the society is having. But I think there has to be some mix of internalized restraint and ethical conduct that people take seriously, and government regulation that prevents people from doing things that are too destructive or illegal or have calamitous consequences for the society at large. That's how capitalism survives. If you don't have some mix of those things, a culture of responsible decision making and some government regulation that doesn't strangle innovation but creates guidance or guardrails, that's where the economy can thrive and be healthy. If you have only self-regulation or too much government regulation, then it's a serious problem. And right now we have this kind of patchwork of states that are trying to fill the vacuum that the federal government has left, and we don't have a good situation, unfortunately.
So at the beginning of the internet, there was the Electronic Frontier Foundation that was
that's still around. They're still around.
Yeah. So it was started, at the very early stages of the internet, and the premise of what they did was to develop standards for what does it mean to be a good citizen on the internet.
To use the old term, netizen.
Netizen, exactly. And so that, and policies were created around all of this. This is how spam laws were created and so forth. And so, in absence of all of this, just this past week, Anthropic, again, being, a different kind of go-to-market company, created this project called Project Glasswing, which is an AI security initiative. It's led by Anthropic, and it's getting attention because it brings together Apple and Microsoft and Nvidia to collaborate on a solution. And that solution is really all around data sharing and cybersecurity, identifying where there are vulnerabilities and threats and exploits, and how to how the data sharing will work, and are people going to be in control of their data in this moment? That's always been the dream. So many companies would try to create a business model around that where
which has not succeeded, basically.
Where people are the network, right? And so the idea is, how do you deal with all of this in this new paradigm? AI has created a new problem. Threats are moving faster. Security issues are looming. So what's the solution? Do you pool intelligence? Do you pool these companies together to create, an MCP, a modal context protocol, or a new protocol around data sharing that gives people the ability to share their own data and flip these switches on and off? What is the process? And so Project Glasswing is designed to create that conversation between Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, that are natural competitors with each other in some ways, and also partners in other ways. But and I'm sure Google will be part of this discussion as well. But good for them for leading that, and that's again another go-to-market strategy that they're leading the market with. So.
Right. I mean, they're taking on the leadership role that other companies are not exercising, because Silicon Valley used to be about making money and also making the world a better place. The making the world a better place stuff is completely gone now. It's exclusively about money, pretty much. And these companies are sort of discarding or disrespecting the rights of individuals, or their impact of their conduct on individuals. Facebook is the poster child for that, in view of trying to accelerate growth and profit and please the market. And you need back to this point, you need companies like Anthropic that have a kind of enlightened self-interest and are going to do the right thing. And you need government to say, if you don't do the right thing, or if you cross these lines, we're here to, like antitrust, we're going to break up the company, or we're going to fine you, or we're going to impose rules on you, because these companies will maximize their own profit and growth to the exclusion of all other values.
Or pay me some money and I'll look the other way.
Well, that's corruption, right? And that's also going on because these wealthy individuals and CEOs of these companies have corrupted the political process.
Or maybe just get cheaper iPhones and the discounts built in. Just end up sharing your data.
Well, I mean, Neil, Neil and I have been in this sort of local marketing space for a very long time, and I was doing a lot of work around location intelligence for quite a while. And we were looking at, like, oh, look at all the great things you can do. You can see who went into the store and map it back to an online ad exposure. And you can link all these channels together and get real clear data about what's happening. And you can infer things about, somebody goes to the airport 2 times a month. You can infer they're a business traveler, and you can segment and target them with these kinds of things. And I did all these webinars and, wrote a lot about that kind of stuff. And it was in the larger context of these companies are going to be ethical and restrained and not act like China and use them as surveillance tools, right? So where are we today? Location data is being used as a surveillance tool, and it's being bought by government departments on the open market and used in unethical and arguably illegal ways. These are Fourth Amendment. There are Fourth Amendment implications, search and seizure, and stuff like that, warrantless searches. And what these companies have shown is that when the market incentives are for them to maximize growth,
there are no restraints.
They're not going to do the right thing. Think of all the dark patterns around privacy that exist. Like, oh, you have total control over your privacy settings. Well, you've got to do all kinds of stuff that you can't. Google has been playing hide the ball with privacy for years and gaslighting. Oh, we're simplifying everything. But meanwhile, people have no idea what to do to control how they're being targeted, what data is being used, all of that stuff. And so you need some neutral arbiter that's an honest broker to set some baselines and say, you guys go do it yourselves, but if you can't, or if you don't, or if you step over the line, we're here to make sure that the order is preserved and people's rights are respected. And I think
Well,
that's not
you got to hand it to Anthropic for giving it a shot here with
totally,
Project Glasswing,
totally.
and that's kind of my point is that in this moment there is this am I going to be a responsible company as I unleash this who knows what kind of powerful AI model onto the world, and and so whereas if you watch the Sam Altman interview, he kind of just shrugs it off to say, well, we just told people that they need to be careful about this stuff, and it's like, well, that's one thing to just like tell people to be careful about it while you unleash this beast onto the world, or you actually don't release the beast onto the world and you hold it back, and then you build
Right.
guardrails in front of that with companies and banks and protections thoughtfully before you just go for the gold, and so that's the difference to me.
That was the issue with the Department of Defense. Anthropic, ran into a problem with them because they wanted to use Claude for mass surveillance, including, I suppose, domestic surveillance and autonomous killing, right? Sort of AI triggered battlefield decisions or targets. And Anthropic said, no, that's a bridge too far for us. And then, of course, OpenAI came in and said, yeah, we'll do it. We're here.
It's not a bridge too far for us.
Yeah. And then Altman realized what an F up it was, and he's like, well, we have some ethics too. And then he said to internal employees, he said, well, we believe these things, but we can't really control what other people do with our technology. Right. Which is a complete cop out.
That's the thing that I'm talking about. You can't just absolve yourself from,
Right.
being responsible when you're the company that's actually releasing it. Like you just,
right. That's right.
I have a problem with that personally, because I feel like, and I really respect Anthropic for just pumping the brakes here for a second, going, okay, we've got something that's extremely powerful. Let's put some guardrails in place. Let's get others involved in this so that we, don't really, do some damage.
So they can build defenses in advance of the hackers getting these tools, because
Exactly.
that's what's going to happen. And there's going to be, I mean, the whole cybersecurity thing is a very, very scary proposition. I have a brother who's younger than I am, and he's much more technically inclined, and he's sort of moving into AI and cybersecurity from software development and other stuff. And this is just going to be a huge, huge, huge area for everybody, because these tools are just going to be used relentlessly by bad actors, state actors, and criminals to hack and hack and hack for government secrets, for corporate secrets, for individual data. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I get these notices of data breaches, like, oh, all your healthcare data, all your credit information, everything was leaked. And then there's some nonsense with, we'll give you a subscription to LifeLock, and it's up to you, figure it out. I mean, it's just totally unacceptable. So it's very important that Anthropic is creating a model of an ethical AI company to shame Google and Microsoft and OpenAI in particular, and Elon Musk over there, who's creating child porn with his AI, and to get them to sort of come forward and say, okay, well, here's the standard that we need to conform to, otherwise we're going to be branded as less than whatever ethical. I mean, I think it's very important, but it shouldn't rely on like one guy who has some sense of ethics, or a handful of people internally.
Well, maybe what this is doing is that this is Anthropic's effort here to pull together Nvidia, Apple, Microsoft, maybe Google into the conversation, and setting a precedent to say, actually, the first of its kind, I would say, and hopefully, more will follow in this path.
Well,
Yeah.
and think about it. I decided to give Anthropic access to my calendar, access to my emails. I'll give it access to whatever it asks,
And that's trust.
there's
And that's
perception of trust
right.
that I'm going to rely on now for a while.
Right. Trust is an undersold factor in all these technology companies. I mean, it's like trust versus monopoly. So nobody trusts Google, but you use it because you've always used it and because you're familiar with it and comfortable with it. Or not, nobody trusts it, but fewer people than used to
They've
trust
got
it.
access, obviously, to all your emails if you're using Gmail. So, that's
Well, and Google's trying to get more data. They're trying to get more data for their AI systems. But trust is really, really important, and OpenAI is losing trust, and Claude is building up trust, and that's going to benefit Claude, the brand, and Claude's products, and all of that stuff over time.
Well, this is right in Apple's wheelhouse in particular. They are the technology who builds trust with consumers, and they lead their whole marketing initiative with trust. So it's interesting that Apple is kind of taking a backseat to all this AI stuff, even though they have Apple Intelligence that nobody uses. They are going to make some kind of move in this market, and they're kind of, their own pumping of the brakes has kind of worked in their favor here, because they need to see how the data side of this is going to sort out and which partners they're going to select in this. Maybe it becomes Anthropic through this process and the whole data sharing side of this to give users control of their data. We'll see.
If you were sitting at Apple today wondering who to pick between OpenAI,
You'd pick Anthropic. Anthropic. No brainer.
Right. And maybe 6 months ago you might not have.
But
right?
they picked Google as their default kind of AI tool. That's largely because of the history between them, I think. But I think if you have to do it from scratch, you pick Anthropic.
And
That's really interesting.
That's a telling comment we've just made, right? In 6 months or a year, they might have made an entirely different choice.
Well, in theory, I mean, Apple's in the advantageous position of being one of these gatekeepers, right? I mean, the Europeans define gatekeepers who have control over, access to information or access to markets. The App Store being an example of that. And were Apple not a dominant software platform, a dominant mobile platform, they would not be in the position that they're in. They would just be, an also ran, right? Because if they had to compete,
it'd be Samsung.
Well, Samsung is still the largest OEM for Android, but still, right. But Apple has the benefit of being a quasi monopoly. They're not a true monopoly, but they're sort of a quasi monopoly, and so they can sit back and say, we're going to pick the best of breed solutions for our thing, and then they can sort of dictate terms to some degree, and then they can roll these things out. Now, the thing that is problematic for Apple is the actual execution of this, because the much ballyhooed OpenAI integration was just a piece of crap, to use the vernacular, and was worthless, basically. I mean, why would I use it? I just go straight to ChatGPT and just use ChatGPT. So we've got to hope that whatever they do with Gemini, and then whatever they do with other models, OpenAI, Anthropic, whatever else they integrate, is going to be a little bit more seamless and a little bit more functional than. I mean, I turned, you can sort of program something into your action button on the phone, and I turned that into a ChatGPT, so I could just directly access that instead of Siri. I mean, Siri is now a kind of a caricature of, it's like the really bad version.
Well, maybe in this new release of Siri, that will be the entry point for users in the interface to be able to, access all this capability that you're talking about. And if you want to switch your model to,
Claude, you just switch it,
you can
like
switch
a voice.
your model, and
I mean, what Apple should have done is that they should have just focused on functions on the phone and tried to make Siri a more capable controller of the phone functions. Like, so you could, turn this or that app off. I mean, you can do a number of things, but it's unreliable, and it's
I think they
really
tried
limited.
to do that. It just became too. It was they were boiling the ocean with the number of features that they were that you could do, and they just didn't do any of them very well.
You know, going back to that Tristan Harris guy, one of the things he did say is there should be the analogy should be number portability. So I've built up this conversation inside of ChatGPT. I should be able to take all of that stuff over to any other AI tool that I want. And that would create the market incentives to behave, right? If
Well, maybe that's Apple's play in this is, you know, they become the interoperator of this, or maybe this is Project Glasswing, you know, that creates that interoperability. And if you want to participate in this good citizen kind of environment, you now have the ability to do that. But at the end of the day, it needs to be the customer's choice.
Right. I mean,
the portability hadn't happened in the cell phone business.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Europeans have been trying to do things like that with customer data, make it easier to access, make it easier to take with you, and all of that. And I think, you know, Claude, it created a tool where you could bring your memory from ChatGPT over to Claude, and that'll probably be pretty commonplace. You know, in the same way that you can switch from an iPhone to an Android device pretty easily, take all your data and your apps and stuff. The problem with that is if you level the playing field too much, you commoditize things. Now, maybe the example you gave, Neil, where you've got Claude integrated with a lot of your daily utilities and you're just invested there, then that is then you're not going to go back to somebody else because you're accustomed to using it. It works well and all of that. But I think if you say take your data everywhere, and make it easy to change, to switch from thing to thing, then you're dealing with a kind of more of a commoditization problem. However, people don't change their cell phone carrier, you know, because there's so much inertia around just the way you've got them.
They are all lowering their prices. I mean, the reason there's not a lot of change is because they've all, you know, figured out that if they raise the prices too much, people will move somewhere else.
Yeah. I mean, that's a sort of a analogy, and then it isn't. I mean, I have T-Mobile. I'm very unhappy with it, but I don't change because I got better things to worry about, right? And then you've got Verizon and AT&T.
And I get Netflix for some discount too. It's great.
So on this note, it's a very practical note of changing services. Neil, you had a notes from the field kind of thing.
Oh, I talked. Yeah,
that was
so what was the experience like? What did you do exactly to make that switch from ChatGPT to Claude?
Well, I took, as I said earlier, I took a picture of this picture and I said, "Where is this?" And ChatGPT wanted to tell me it was an
A/B comparison.
Yes, right. And Claude said, "No, it's Albuquerque." And so, and then I've been thinking about, you know, moving my stuff over. And then I talked to somebody and they said, "Oh, well, you could use Cowork or whatever it is." And
Cowork.
So I tried that, and I set it up so all my emails were connected, and I just kind of have moved. And it didn't take me very long. Yeah. And I've been the other thing is I've been planning this trip for in the fall, and I think ChatGPT led me astray on some train connections, like how easy they were. And then as I looked into it, it was like, you know, that's a very tough train connection. So I put it all back. I put all the stuff into Claude, and it said, "Well, let me give you a better idea how to make that connection that's much faster." So it just, you know, maybe it learned from ChatGPT and improved what ChatGPT had done, but it did improve what I was trying to accomplish.
I would push back a little bit. I'm sympathetic to Claude. I use Claude. I'm using Claude more than I used to. Claude is a better writer than ChatGPT. If you need copy, Claude does a better job than what ChatGPT does. But there are situations where I find ChatGPT is more thorough or more accurate than Claude and has broader capabilities. But I try and use them together.
Like what?
Well, see, I knew you were going to ask me that. I'm just responding
extemporaneously. I've been doing the same thing, and I have to say, I'll give you an example. Yeah. So I just past few days have been drafting an agreement, right? I have an agreement that I've used in the past, uploaded it, said I wanted to make these changes, and in ChatGPT, it said, great, I can make those changes. And it just gave me the changes as paragraphs I could copy and paste and drop in. But it made so many other changes throughout the document. And I said, just write the whole document again, because I don't want to just go sit there and forensically change this and that. Just write the whole thing. And then it gave me a summary of the agreement. And I'm like, no. It needs to give me the whole thing. And it did another iteration. It was just, again, a summary. And I did this several times. I kept giving it a prompt. And really what I wanted it to do is give me word
Give
for
you a
word, complete draft of the agreement. And we got to a point where I was like, this is really the last time that I'm going to ask. I felt like I was talking to like like, don't make me count to 3,
Right. Kid.
And so, yeah. So then I took I was done with the whole thing. And I'm like, you know what? I'm done with that. I went over to Claude, did the same thing. First try, bam, there's my new agreement with all the changes added to it. And 5 minutes later, didn't have to sit there and cajole it and ask it, several times, why aren't you delivering the right result?
I mean, I don't want to sit here and defend ChatGPT given everything we've said, but I still feel like there are things that it does that are better than Claude. But I use Claude whenever I want to generate some sort of draft, or it's more, Claude is more human, and it has a more human voice, right? ChatGPT, everything ChatGPT does is a kind of an outline. And I agree, you sometimes have to prompt ChatGPT. In your example, I've not had that experience where I say what I really want is this thing, and then it does the thing that I don't want. I haven't had that experience, but I think they each have their strengths and weaknesses. And I've had a lot of problems with Gemini, but it definitely has strengths. Like, I've been using the Ask Maps feature of Google Maps, and it's a very good experience. It's like AI mode imported into Maps with all the Maps data, which presumably AI mode has access to. And like when I was just in Mexico, I was asking for, like, I need to find a rooftop bar that I can walk to and has food and live music and this kind of thing, which are always these esoteric examples that the blog posts give. But I was really doing that, and it worked.
That's awesome.
It was such a superior experience to traditional Google Maps that Google is definitely going to be a superior experience for certain kinds of real world data that the others just don't have, or they're scraping Google or whatever.
I'll extrapolate on that for a second, because I had this really interesting experience with Google with NotebookLM, which is
now being integrated into Gemini.
And with Cloud Code. So here's the idea. So when you're using Cloud Code and you're using and you're uploading documents to it to train it, what happens is that it uses all of the tokens each time you ask it a query. It goes through all of those documents again, and it just chews up a bunch of tokens. The little hack that I did was I uploaded a bunch of documents to NotebookLM, connected via MCP Claude to NotebookLM, and then did my whole thing in Cloud Code and told it only access NotebookLM when you need to. And the number of tokens went down by like 80%. It was pretty incredible. And so this also begs the question around interoperability and how to use these tools, and how some tools are better than others. And, it's just going to continue to evolve in this kind of way. The interoperability side of this is going to be really important as we go forward.
All right, here's the final question to this group today on this Friday, whatever it is. If you were in the job market and wanted to go to work for one of these AI companies, which company would you?
Anthropic.
Yeah, right there with you.
And Anthropic.
Heartbeat, right? Yeah. I mean, that tells you that right there. That tells you a lot about where the space is moving. I would say in 3 months, if we come back to this OpenAI versus Anthropic, we're going to see some very significant shifts in the market. and we're going to see Anthropic gaining considerable momentum and OpenAI having some real struggle.
So on the enterprise side, that's absolutely the case. On the consumer side, ChatGPT is still the dominant brand, still leads Anthropic by a massive margin. And so we'll see how it plays out in the next
So
3
did
months.
AOL once upon a time.
I
And so did
get the feeling that slow and steady wins this race. That's that's my prediction.
Yeah, I mean,
April 10th. Let's come back to it in a few months.
So a
and
year
see.
from now, things may not be that different, but 5 years, things might
I
be
think
quite
the
different.
pace of change and acceleration is going to be faster than anything we
Yeah,
saw.
But this will all be academic because we'll all be living in caves and eating food out of cans come the apocalypse.
Come the singularity.
The
All right.
AI
On that
apocalypse.
note, guys, that's a great note to wrap things up, and we'll just leave it there. But thanks everybody for listening. We appreciate it. Share, like, subscribe. Tune in next time when your faithful heroes bring the future to you.
Yes. All right.
All
Bye-bye.
right, guys. Thanks so much. We'll catch you next time.
Fun show.